Hi everyone, my name's Alex Jamal, and today I'm going to give a brief lecture about business etiquette. A little bit about me before I start. I worked for 7 years in London in a corporate and commercial bank, one of the biggest banks in Europe. And over this time, I performed in a multitude of different roles. I started on the graduate scheme. From then I went to a sales role. From then I went to a risk role within the bank. And finally, I was in management and strategy. So I hope you find this useful, and let's get started. So the most important thing that I think about business etiquette is to realize that it's not one big thing. It's many small things put together that build up a big picture of the image that you want to present of yourself. So I've picked a quote from Vincent van Gogh, the famous painter, that I think really encapsulates what business etiquette is about. Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things put together. Now, as I said, I think it's a fantastic quote for business etiquette, and as we go through this lecture, you'll see why. So, what is business etiquette? I think we need to start by defining what business etiquette is before we go into the core of this lecture. So, business etiquette is expected behaviors and expectations for individuals within a professional environment. That involves treating co-workers and employees with respect and courtesy, really to create a pleasant working environment for everyone. So my definition of business etiquette would be a set of manners, a set of rules, unwritten rules, really. There's no rule book for this, but unwritten rules that govern your behavior when you're in an organization. Why do we have these? We'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but mainly to foster a good working environment, to foster mutual respect between employees, to improve communication, and ultimately businesses exist to make profit. So it's to make sure that the business can make profit in the most streamlined and effective way possible through following this set of unwritten rules. So that is business etiquette in my mind, okay? Why do we do it? Why is it important? Well, it's very simple actually. Business etiquette will boost chances of success, whether you're the owner of a business, whether you're an employee, whether you're a contractor. Showing business etiquette, showing good manners, behaving in a courteous way in a professional context will ultimately benefit you. Customers, employees, management, these are like walking, talking advertisements for a company. So if they feel good, if they feel that they've been treated with respect, if they feel like they have been treated in a professional way, then they're more likely to come back to you or to stay within your company or to work well with you. When people feel disrespected, not just workers, but customers too, they're less likely to come back to you for more of your product or to use your service. Employees are less likely to perform well. If management perceives you as not showing good business etiquette, they're less likely to promote you. They're less likely to give you chances. So really, that's the why. And I want to say another quote from Mary Montagu: "Civility costs nothing and buys everything." So basically what's that saying is good manners, treating people with courtesy, doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't even require that much extra effort. But the results that you can obtain for that, are invaluable. So that's the why of business etiquette. At first, I want to consider some questions. How do you treat your customers? How do you treat your co-workers? How do you treat your boss and your supervisors? How do you behave within the office? How do you behave when in meetings? How do you conduct yourself during telephone calls? How do you conduct yourself during business events or training events? What kind of emails do you send? Do you follow a dress code at work? These are all critical questions when thinking about business etiquette. They're very important questions to ask yourself. So maybe pause the lecture and have a think about these questions before we continue. Moving on, I have Alex's 3 golden rules about business etiquette. Number 1, Be polite and professional in all forms of communication. No exceptions to this rule. It doesn't matter who you're communicating with, it doesn't matter how the other person behaves, and it doesn't matter if you are meeting them face to face, by phone, or communicating with them through email. Each interaction needs to be professional. You need to show yourself in the most positive light possible, and you need to be as polite as possible. And I reiterate, it does not matter the way the other person behaves. 2, always be on time. Always. Be early if you can. It doesn't matter whether it's a meeting, coming into work for, coming into work for a normal day. Punctuality is so critical. In Britain, it's a sign of disrespect if you come late. You are effectively saying to the person, your time is not important to me. I don't respect your time. That's why I was late. Of course, we all have times when there's an accident, or we can't get to work on time, or there's something that happens, but this is the exception. And these are exceptions. And you're more likely to be believed with these exceptions if your track record is one of always being punctual. Time is the most valuable thing in the world, more valuable than money. No one can buy time. So don't be late. It's that simple. If you're running behind, or if something bad has happened, then please contact the person you're meeting, or your supervisor, or your manager, or whoever it might be, and let them know what's happened, why you are late, and when you will arrive. It's the most courteous thing to do. As a rule, though, I will reiterate, try never to be late. 3, dress appropriately. Studies have shown that the first thing people notice about you is your appearance, okay? Now, we like to think that it's what's inside that matter, but let's be realistic. When you meet someone, you probably have the same reaction. You judge them on their appearance. What they're wearing, whether their hair's combed, whether they've trimmed their beard, whether they're clean shaven, whatever it might be. So think about this when you get ready to go to work, or to a meeting, or to training, or whatever in a professional context. You must dress appropriately, okay? I like to say dress for success. Dress in the way that you want to be perceived. Wear smart clothes. Also, studies have also shown wearing smart clothes, a shirt for example, you feel more smart, and when you feel more smart, you act more smart. So think about this. And when I say dress for success and dress appropriately, I also mean practice good hygiene. Don't look like you've just got out of bed in the morning, of course. People notice these small details, they build up a mental image of you, and this may affect you, whether it be a customer, co-worker, boss. So remember this one. So those are the 3 golden rules. I'm going to repeat them. Be polite and professionals. Be polite and professional in all forms of communication. Always be on time and don't be late. Dress appropriately. So, preparation is key to business etiquette. It doesn't require studying, it doesn't require loads of work, it doesn't require loads of reading, but preparation is key. Things go wrong in life. In English, we have a term called Murphy's Law. And Murphy's Law states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So be prepared. A perfect example I'll give you is when exiting or leaving a professional encounter or conversation. You should have exit lines prepared. Why? Because it will look strange if you just suddenly leave a conversation halfway through someone talking. It will look strange if there's not a natural end to a conversation and you leave. The person might be thinking you're rude. So before you enter a professional conversation, a professional meeting, a professional encounter of any kind, you must have some kind of exit strategy prepared. Okay? Some examples might be, nice to meet you. I've got to run now. It was lovely to speak to you. Please give me your contact details and I'd love to continue this conversation at a later date. You might excuse yourself and say you need the bathroom just to quickly pop away without being rude. You might say, see you next week or see you at the next meeting. You need to be the one talking when making an exit. Otherwise, you're interrupting a person and you'll be perceived as being rude. So I've used this exit as an example for why preparation is so key in business etiquette within professional contexts. Without preparation, it can look rushed, and at worst, it can look rude. So think about what you're going to do. Spend some time thinking about how you're going to approach certain professional situations. This will mean that you are prepared and you're able to deal with these things as they arise, and you won't be rushed and under pressure in the event itself. So, I've split this lecture into a couple of main topics, and I'll go through each topic with some kind of not golden rules, but some kind of pointers as to what's important in each kind of context. And the first topic I want to cover is language. So, in Britain, we're extremely formal, much more formal than our American counterparts. And so language is very important. Now, language is important in any culture because language gives a person imagery. People build up, like with your clothes, they build up an image of you by the language you use. So always be careful with the language you use. Of course, always be polite as per my first golden rule, but think about the language you use. For example, the word can. Can you do me a favor? Well, it's much more polite and it sounds much more friendly to use is if it's not a problem. It's a good phrase to start questions with. If it's not a problem, would you mind if we postponed our meeting? Instead of, can we postpone our meeting? The latter sounds more aggressive. The first sounds rude. The first sounds much more polite, much more civil, much softer. And also it gives the sense to the person that you're sorry that you have to postpone the meeting and that you're asking them graciously for a favor. And it's important how the other person feels, especially in business. Perception is reality, and you want to make the other person feel that you care. There are three other phrases maybe to think about when using the English language in a business context. By any chance. Do you know where Mariam is, by any chance? Instead of, do you know where Mariam is? If you don't mind. If you don't mind. I would like to ask a few questions, if you don't mind. Instead of, I would like to ask a few questions. Softens the phrase. Polite. Finally, I'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate it if you could call me back. Instead of, could you call me back? Again, softens the phrase, more polite. Language is so critical. I think that you really need to be thinking in a professional context about what you want out of the interaction. Why are you communicating with the person? Most people don't remember what you sold them. They remember how you made them feel. And language is critical in this context. How you speak to people, how you make them feel. So don't forget, little recap, no can, use could and would. Use phrases like, if it's not a problem, by any chance, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it. The next topic I'd like to cover is greetings. Now, many different greetings exist across the world, okay? In France, it's 2 kisses. In Georgia, it's 1 kiss. In England, it's no kisses. Now, I would say you must play it safe here. In a European or British context, even an American context, the best greeting is a firm handshake. When you shake someone's hand, you make eye contact and you smile. That is the best greeting form. It's the less risky one, and it's the most accepted one in a professional context. Always say your full name when introducing yourself. If your name is hard to pronounce, you can shorten it. My birth name is Alexandre Jamal. I would introduce myself as Alex Jamal. That way, people don't have to worry about pronouncing it. They don't have to worry about getting it wrong. They don't have to worry about anything. If you're not sure about someone's name after they've introduced themselves, ask them. For example, Alexandre? Was it Alexandre? Thank you, sorry, I just didn't want to pronounce it wrong. That makes people think that you care. The worst thing is having your name pronounced wrong. Someone called me the other day Alexandra. Well, clearly I'm a man and I don't want to be called a female's name. But maybe they could have checked, oh, you have the French spelling of your name. Do you mind if I just call you Alex? It's polite. It's the correct way to be. When you are being introduced to someone, stand up. It's a form of respect. If someone came here and I just shake their hand like that, it does not give them the impression that I care about meeting them. Stand up and greet people warmly. There's a difference between being warm and over-friendly. Be polite and professional. Show someone you care about meeting them. You care who they are. We all like to feel valued. Greetings are so important. They are the first impression people will get of you. Introduce others. The worst thing is in a professional context when there's about 3 people and you only know one of them and the person you know hasn't introduced you to the 2 others. It's very awkward. In social situations, this is the same. Make sure everyone knows each other. Do you know John? Have you met Andy? It's very simple and it creates an inclusive environment. Pay attention to people's names. The worst thing is when you don't remember people's names. I know from experience how difficult this can be. I will give you 2 tips to help you. But remembering people's names is very important and it takes effort. It takes effort. One trick is to identify a characteristic. Alex is English, so I'm going to remember English Alex, English Alex. Or maybe when you're speaking within a meeting or reunion or whatever it might be, use their name at least 3 times. Alex, where did you say you work again? Alex, what's the strategy for this? Any next steps, Alex? By using this repetition, in English we say repetition is the father of learning. By using this repetition, you'll cement the person's name in your brain. A few other points. It's okay to open doors for your guests. It's also okay to open doors for ladies to let them through, but don't pull people's chairs out for them. Like the handshake, in a business setting, we leave the social gender rules behind. Okay? We don't want to make ladies or women feel uncomfortable in a business setting. We like to use what we call in England an even playing field. Everyone is treated the same. So of course, ladies should go through a door first, but don't overdo it. Don't pull people's chairs out and do things like that, okay? Keep it professional. So that's greetings. So the next topic I'd like to cover is meetings. Now, whether you're meeting with your team members, shareholders, clients, the way you conduct yourself during business meetings tends to leave a very long-lasting impression. Make it a good one. This is where business etiquette becomes critical. So, I've got about 10 points in this one. Obviously, meetings are very important. We regularly have a lot of meetings in business, so important to remember these things. When someone else is speaking, show that you're listening. Now, showing that you're listening doesn't mean just closing your mouth or not looking at your phone. Showing that you're listening means that you're actively listening and engaging with what the person's saying. I like to nod or agree. Yes, I agree, definitely. Things like this shows people that you care about what they're saying, that you're listening, you're not daydreaming about what am I going to have for lunch, okay? It's very important. People often will find you more interesting the more they talk and the less you talk. People like to talk, it's normal. People like the sound of their own voice, it's normal. So show them that you're listening. Definitely, I agree, yep. Now, it's not polite to interrupt others. It isn't. But sometimes in meetings, you have to interrupt or you won't be heard. Now, there are some phrases we can use to make sure it doesn't come across as rude. For example, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I just make a point here? I'm sorry to jump in. I'm sorry to cut in. As a rule, as I said, interrupting people is not a good thing, but sometimes you have to. make sure you do it in a polite way. Sometimes maybe you want to make a point before the presenter or whoever's talking moves on to the next point. Before we move on, could I just make a comment about this? So you can interrupt in a polite way. As a rule though, if someone's making a speech or a presentation, we leave questions to the end. And if someone's talking to you on a one-on-one context, you don't want to talk when they're talking, because obviously that shows you're not listening. Now, we often don't listen to people. We often like to think about the next thing we're going to say. So it does take active work to really listen. Rule 3, no phones. No phones at all. They shouldn't even be on the table. They should be in silent in your pocket, or you can leave them at your desk when you're in a meeting. Unless you are awaiting some urgent information or some urgent personal matter, you must not use your phone. It is incredibly rude in British culture to be typing an email or sending a text message when you're in a meeting or when you're with someone else. And putting your phone on the table also sends a signal to the people in the meeting, you're not that important to me. My phone is important to me. Keep your phone in your suit jacket, keep your phone in your handbag. Do not use your phone in a meeting unless it's critical. Please, it's very important. Speak clearly. Speak slowly. When people speak fast in meetings, not only is it hard to understand them, we get the impression that they're nervous and not confident. I sometimes like to imagine there's honey in my mouth. So my mouth is sticky and I'm having to really speak clearly. Enunciate your words. Really say things clearly. Take a breath before you talk and slow down, because I promise you, you might think you're speaking super duper slowly, but you won't be speaking as slow as you think. So really, 10 times slower when you're speaking in a meeting. Also, have confidence in yourself. What you're saying is important. So make sure it's clear and slowly said so people can understand it and digest the point you're making. If you are in charge of a meeting or you're the assistant to someone having a meeting, send an agenda. Every meeting in a professional context should have an agenda. Start time, what topics you'll discuss, some space for any other business at the end and questions. Having an agenda is such an important thing in terms of business etiquette, because it lets people know what's coming up, what they need to prepare for, what kinds of points they need to think about in advance, what kind of discussion you'll be having. Also, most meetings tend to overrun, and having an agenda means there's some kind of plan and some kind of organization so people can stick to it. Agendas are really important. Also, write things down in a meeting. Not only when people look at you in the meeting writing points down, you know, obviously don't write it down like a dictation, but writing points down, it shows you're engaged, it shows you're listening, it shows that you're taking away actions from the meeting. Managers notice things like this. I never went to a meeting in 7 years in the bank without my notepad and pen. I needed to write down what was being spoken about. Do I have any actions? Do I need to do anything else? And the perception other people have of you is, this is a serious guy. He cares about what's going on in this meeting. Call on everyone to participate in the meeting. Ask people. If people are not engaged, ask them. John, what's your view on this? Andy, do you agree? It's inclusive. That's what business etiquette is. Courtesy and inclusivity, excuse me. So what you need to do is make everyone feel welcome, make everyone feel part of the team, make everyone feel like they have something to say. Before you leave the meeting, be clear on actions. Actions are what you have to do. What is the output from the meeting? Don't leave the meeting with no idea. People will think you're unprofessional, unprepared, disorganized. So know what you've got to do. When's the next meeting date? Maybe you should suggest, guys, when are we having the next meeting? It shows you're switched on. It shows you're on the ball. It shows you're thinking ahead. All these things build up an image of whether or not you have the right business etiquette. Eating in meetings. Unless it's a lunch meeting, Unless there are snacks on the table in the meeting room, never eat. Coffee is acceptable, but do not eat. And if you do eat, if there is food on the table, obviously clean up after yourself, okay? Eating during a meeting is complicated. You know, if someone asks you a question and your mouth is full, or if you're eating something noisy or messy or even worse, smelly, you must remember that eyes are on you at all times, and it is not polite to be eating food when someone else is talking. And finally, and probably most importantly, body language. Body language makes up 93% of all our communication, and your body language in a meeting is so important. You know, if you're sat like this, you know, what impression am I giving there? If you're sat like this, what impression are you giving? If you're sat maybe at the, not right at the edge of your chair, but with a straight posture, open posture, not fiddling with things, not hands in pockets, not on your phone, but an open posture, engaged, listening. Not only is it polite and gives the right impression, it also makes you look better. When we stand up and put our shoulders back, we look better. We look more confident. So think about your posture. It happens to all of us. Sometimes we lean back on our chair. Just catch yourself. You have to, of course, be comfortable, but you should sit up straight, have an open posture, have an open stance, try to avoid crossing your arms, try to avoid fiddling with your face or fiddling with something on the table or having your hands in your pockets. So those are my pointers for meetings in terms of business etiquette. Now, emails. Emails. In today's digital age, we communicate so much more electronically than we have ever done before, and this will only increase. I have a couple of points that I want to make, but also before I start, I'd like to make two statements. Facebook is not an adequate form of business communication. It simply is not. LinkedIn is probably the only social media that one can use in a business context. But Facebook messaging people is not professional. Facebook is for friends, it's for socializing, it's for sharing photos and events and videos. Facebook is not for business. Yes, many businesses market themselves on Facebook. They increase their online presence on Facebook. But if you are contacting customers or your boss or whoever it might be, Facebook is not an adequate tool. It gives entirely the wrong impression, in my opinion. That moves me on to my second point. Email. Everyone who is working should have an email, regardless of whether they are a freelancer or whether they work individually, whether they have their own company. You should have an email. And my suggestion would be to have the most professional email possible. My email is ahpjamal@gmail.com. Now, those are my names, Alexandre Hicham Philippe, my surname Jamal, @gmail.com. That's the format you should have. Last name, last name, initials, last name, something like that. You should have a professional email, and you should contact people via email. Whether it's for business development, whether it's for introductions, whether it's to ask questions, but you should have an email. Imagine receiving an email from juicyfruit29@gmail.com. Would you take this email seriously, or would it go straight into your spam or your junk box? So think about the impression you're giving, not just physically, but electronically. Aim to answer all internal emails that's within your organization within one day. It'll be embarrassing if you haven't replied to someone you work in the same office with. And you cannot be too busy to reply to an email, unless it's a long email and it's asking you to do many tasks. Then you can reply with just a polite message. Hi, John. Your email's been well received. Very busy today, but I'll get back to you as soon as possible. That's courteous. It lets the person know you're not just simply ignoring them and leaving them on unread. External emails, that's from people outside of your organization, you should reply to them within a minimum of 3 days. Same rules apply if you go over this limit. Let them know you've got their email, you're working on their request or their questions or whatever it might be, and you will get back to them. Second point, always include a subject line. The subject line is like the headline of your email. It's the poster of your email. It tells the person without opening it what this email is about. So think about it. Think about your subject line. Make it strong, make it relevant. How many times have you seen emails in your inbox with silly subject lines? You delete them without even opening them. Think about that from your perspective when you're sending emails. Keep emails brief. No one wants to receive an essay. Also, no one wants to receive an over-friendly email. Dear John, I hope you're well. Get to the point. Thank you in advance. Kind regards. Keep it brief. Also, by keeping it brief, you're more likely to make less errors or less mistakes or anything like that. People in a work context are busy. They don't have time for essays. They don't have time to exchange pleasantries. They want to get to the point. Everyone wants to get to the point. Pay attention to grammar and spelling. It's so important. If I read an email from someone with grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes, simple things that they could have probably picked out, I will build up a mental image of them, and it will be a negative one, and it might not be fair. But it's the reality, and we need to be aware of this reality. Okay? So, really proofread your emails. Read it out loud if you have to. Ask someone to check it if it's important. Don't make mistakes that will make you look bad. If you're attaching something, check you haven't forgotten any attachments. Don't be aggressive in emails. Now, when I say aggressive, it's hard to imagine what I mean, but what I mean is that people don't hear you speak. They just read what you say, so they're likely to interpret it in any way they can. So don't use smiley faces or emojis. Don't use too many exclamation marks. Don't make demands. Remember my could, would, and polite language. Let people know that you care. Thank you in advance. I'm sorry for any inconvenience this might have caused. Think of the psychology of it. You want people to get the right impression of you, even in written communication. So one other thing is, when I was working in the bank, all of our communication was monitored. You know, email etiquette is especially important because your work email is not private, it's property of the company. And some companies monitor their employees. So think about this. Think about this very carefully. Because you might hit send and you might have said something you really regret and there's no way of taking that back, and now someone else has a written, someone else has a written record of it. Ask yourself, would you want your boss or your mother or whoever to read that email? Because you might click send and you might have said something wrong or rude and it might impact your whole career. So think before you hit send. So phone calls. Turn your phone off or put it on silent when ringing might disturb others. Now that doesn't just mean in meetings or at lunches or at training, because of course in those contexts you should not have your phone on loud and it should not be anywhere but in your pocket. I'm going to repeat this point even though you're probably sick of me saying it. Never, ever, ever, ever take a call or a text or an email in the middle of a business meeting. Try and avoid it in social meetings if you can, and working lunches also, but it is less rude. But in a business meeting, a one-on-one meeting or anything like that, taking your phone out is just rude and wrong. When you speak on the phone, people might not have good English skills, they might not have a good connection, so remember to speak slowly, clearly, and distinctly. For example, when I answer the phone, depending on what time it is, good morning, Alex speaking. Good afternoon, Alex speaking. How can I help you? Be pleasant, but be professional. No one wants to speak to someone who's in a bad mood or rude, but at the same time, don't be over friendly and over enthusiastic. You just kind of need to be at that stable place, okay? If you're on a conference call, put it on mute when you're not speaking. No one wants to hear background noise. And as a rule, if you're on a conference call, have it in a quiet place. Not where there's an echo, not where there's bad reception, not where you can hear a lot of outside disturbing noise. Try and have it in a place where you can be heard and you can listen. As a rule though, I mute the conference call when I am not speaking. Sometimes you have to remember to unmute it when you want to talk, but that's better than someone hearing you having a conversation with the waiter when you're in a restaurant because you couldn't find a quiet place to talk. Now, in a more general sense, I want to talk about the workplace, okay? Because whether we like it or not, we spend most of our time at work, and we probably spend more time at work than we do with our families. So it's important to think about how you behave in a professional context, and this is really important in terms of business etiquette. First impressions, make a good first impression. It's so important. Unfortunately, as I said before, people build up such a huge image of you from their first impression of you, and it's very hard to change someone's first impression, though it happens. Smiling is proven to reduce stress and boost the mood of people around you. So smile. No one's asking you to constantly walk around like the Cheshire cat with a big smile, but when you're meeting people, when you're making a point, don't be grumpy always. Often you'll see, and you can try this out for yourself if you don't believe me, walk down the street and smile at people. Smile. A lot of people will smile back. A lot of people will. When you go and order a coffee in a restaurant, smile at the waitress or the waiter and see if they respond positively back to you. It's a powerful thing. In the office, don't overshare. Don't drag your personal life into a professional setting. If you're going through troubles and problems, and we all have this, try and keep it hidden. If you have a serious problem, then of course speak to your manager or your boss about it, but don't share too much about your personal life. It's not considered professional, and everyone has things going on and they probably don't want to know about your things. In English we call it oversharing. Oversharing. So don't break that line between home and work. There is a clear dividing line, and your home life is your home life and your work life is your work life. This also includes taking too many personal calls at work. You want to avoid that, and if you have to take them, step outside and have the conversation outside. You don't want people knowing about what's going on in your home life. It's your personal business. Keep it personal. In French, there's an expression which I'll translate into English for you now, which is, don't wash your dirty linen in public. So don't wash your dirty clothes in public, okay? That's basically what I'm saying. Keep your personal life private and your work life, your work life. There is a difference between keeping your private life separate and being personable. You can still be friendly, you can still be approachable, you can still smile at people without oversharing too much. So it's about finding that perfect balance. Write thank you notes or thank you emails. If you've attended a meeting or a business lunch or you met someone, follow up. Thank you so much for the lovely lunch after our meeting. Or thank you so much for the introduction to ABC Company. It's a really good lead. Or I really enjoyed your presentation and would love to pick your brains about it more. It's really impactful to send people thank you notes. When I was young, my mum used to make me write thank you notes for every present I got at a birthday party. Think about it in that context. You're thanking people for their time. You're saying that they're valuable, that they matter. It's so critical in business. I did say there are no emotions at work, but that doesn't mean that people don't feel things. You shouldn't show emotions at work, but as human beings, we are emotional. Don't be a complainer. We all complain. I complain a lot, but don't be the complainer of the office. Don't be the one that's always got a problem, that's always grumpy, that's hungover on Mondays, or that always has an issue. Equally, don't be a gossiper. That's damaging to the business, and if management finds out about this, they'll have their eye on you and not in a positive way. Gossip and complaining should be left for your personal life. Well, gossip personally I don't like at all, but complaining should be left for your personal life. If you work in a big office or you have a shared space, a kitchen, a loo, whatever it might be, show respect to other people. When you live in a home with someone, you show respect. You don't leave your clothes lying around or your dirty mugs everywhere. So show respect for shared areas and shared items, the printer, whatever it might be. Treat it with respect. Clean up after yourself. That gives a good impression of you. And actually, it shows you respect yourself. Similarly, your desk. Keep your workspace tidy. It shows you respect yourself and the company and the people around you. Be respectful of other people's space. Personal space is a big thing in Britain. Don't get too close to people when you talk to them. If someone's working, don't lean over them. Don't turn up behind them. If you need to discuss something with them, don't just walk in or barge in. You know, if they have an office, knock. Or, sorry to bother you, Alex. Or whatever it might be. Offer to schedule a meeting for later or a conversation for later in the week or the day to show that you care about their time. They might be busy. Okay? So what we really must think about is just, you might not mind if people barge in on you or come and speak to you or don't look at your personal space, but other people might mind. So it's a question of always taking into account the needs of others. Now, that's my kind of business advice. And last of all, I really just want to give you some kind of other pointers. Firstly, keep your word. Now, with your friends, I'm sure you keep your word. With your family, I'm sure you keep your word. When you make a commitment in business, whether it's big or small, you must keep it. And if you know that it will be impossible or you won't be able to do it, then let the person know and assume responsibility for promising to do something that you're not going to do. Reputation is everything in business. Personal brand is everything. And if you make 1 or 2 promises or commitments and you don't keep your word, then people will build up an image of you. Otherwise, just don't say it. That's my first pointer. Be flexible. People love flexible people. People love people that can adapt. So sometimes you're going to have to work late. Sometimes you're going to have to change plans, move meetings. People are going to cancel on you. People are going to ask you to do extra work. Unless this is happening every day or every minute of the day, just accommodate these changes. Be polite and respectful. Show that it's no problem. It's water off your back. It's okay. We can move it. I'm not asking you to be a pushover and let people abuse you. I'm saying be courteous and flexible. There's a difference between being taken advantage of and being flexible. My third pointer is use diplomacy. After all, what is business? People selling people, it's relationships. So, there will always be people you don't like. There will always be people you perceive as rude. There will always be people that are not your kind of people and that wouldn't be your friends. Prospects, co-workers, maybe both. Just be polite and kind. Be diplomatic. Always be diplomatic. Always, always in a business context. Don't look for problems. Because trust me, in business, problems will find you anyway. And my last pointer is about accepting feedback and constructive criticism. No one likes to be criticized. No one. I hate it. I actually hate it. But some of the best changes I've made in my life have come back from feedback. So understand that throughout your career, wherever you work, others will offer you feedback. Always take it graciously. Sometimes feedback goes in one ear and out the other, but sometimes feedback is true. Always be gracious. Don't be closed off to it. You will give a bad impression of yourself, you'll harm your relationship with the person giving it to you, and you might lose, most importantly, valuable opportunities to improve. Maybe someone's making a point that you don't want to hear, but that's a very good point.